Guys, I have one question for you, and that is it Victober yet? Hi everyone, it is Kate here for one of my very favorite videos to film all year long, and October has quickly become one of my favorite months of my reading year, and that is because of Victober. In case you are new to my channel, this is a awesome readathon that Katie from Books and Things started in 2016, and now this is its third year, where we try to get people to read more Victorian literature. And Katie is the creator of the readathon, and then I am so excited that I get to co-host along with her. And then Ange from Beyond the Pages is also one of the wonderful hosts, and then of course we have Lucy from Lucy the Reader. And myself and these ladies just have such a deep love for Victorian literature, and we just want to share that with everyone and try to get people to read more. And I would also like to thank my friend Becky for upping my Victober game with this sweatshirt that she gifted me. So thank you, Becky. I cannot wait to be cozied up with this on, October evenings, just reading all the Victorian literature I can get my hands on, wearing it out and about to the park. If I do a couple coffee shop outings, I just can't wait. So yes, I really hope those of you that maybe haven't had the opportunity to participate in Victober before would maybe consider it this year. I do think the challenges that we've selected this year are particularly conducive to those who might not read that much Victorian literature, because there is some mixing and matching you can do within the challenges. And I think also the challenges are there to keep it fun. If the challenges just make the readathon stressful for you, and reading one Victorian novel in the book will be reading more for you than you already do, then you just go with that. Whatever keeps this fun for everyone, I'm very excited all around. So I am planning on doing a couple live shows on my Instagram, no compliments to your mother, and I will also be updating my Insta stories like it's nobody's business. I will be tweeting some. I will be very active on social media. This is just one of my favorite reading months in the whole entire year. And also the ladies and myself, the host, will be trying to do a live show at some point in the month. So hopefully we can make that work and just get to chat with all of you more. If you are not yet a part of the Goodreads group, I will link it down below. I think that is a great way to be able to discuss books, not only with the host, but with all the amazing people who have already joined this Goodreads group. So in case you aren't a part, I will link it down below. And I think it would be a great way to find other people who are reading the books that you are reading and start discussions about those specifically, if you don't have any friends in real life who are interested in discussing these big Victorian tomes. There will be some more surprises coming from my channel. I have some very special Victober videos coming out and just some treats. So I will keep you posted as those are coming along. The first challenge is to read a Victorian novel and then watch a film or TV adaptation of that Victorian novel. And you are in good company as far as watching TV film adaptations of Victorian novels, because there is a really huge number out there and some that are really amazing. And so I will give you my personal recommendations. The first recommendation I have for you is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is just gothicness to the core, and it's a wonderful, wonderful Victorian novel, just filled with atmosphere and so much mystery, and also amazing dialogue. So I really do love Jane Eyre so much. And then the 2006 Ruth Wilson, Toby Stephens adaptation, I think is fabulous. It may have some differences from the book, granted, but what film doesn't? And I really do love this miniseries. I think it really got the ambiance and the atmosphere of Jane Eyre down perfectly. The next on the list is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This is what many love to affectionately call a Victorian Pride and Prejudice, and I do think that's pretty accurate. And the 2004 miniseries with Richard Armitage is just amazing. It's amazing. The costumes are beautiful, like in most period dramas, and the music, I think, really helps to build the spirit of the miniseries. And I do think that you do get a great picture, not only in the book, but in the miniseries, of kind of the struggles between the different classes, and particularly in the working classes, just struggling to work in safe conditions and also to have enough just to feed their families. So it's a really compelling book and miniseries. Next is Bleakhouse by Charles Dickens. So this is a longer one that I picked, so maybe something you would want to do with audiobook as well. But this is two basic storylines. Esther Summerson is one of the main characters, and you kind of get to see, she's also one of the narrators in the story, and you kind of get to see her life unfold at a really critical point. And then the other storyline is about this long-winded case of inheritance that has been just stuck in the cogs of red tape, and it just isn't getting remedied. So there's lots of drama with that. And the miniseries is fabulous. I think it really does a good job kind of portraying the different characters and the moods of the story, and just it's a really all-around wonderful production. Next is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. This, if you just want a little nugget of a Victorian novel, I think this is a great one to start with. It doesn't have so much like an overarching plot, but it's a series of little vignettes. And what's nice then is if you watch the mini series after that, it really ties it into a more of an overarching plot and makes it feel more of like one linear storyline. So I do think that together they're really rewarding to take in. And next is, of course, I can't go a Victober video without recommending Wives and Daughters. This is also a longer one that I did include, so maybe some pairing with some audiobook. The Nadia May audiobook is one that I reread Wives and Daughters with again this spring, and she is just so fabulous at conveying what a lively and dynamic story this seemingly kind of low-key plot line is. And then the miniseries is no different, and I will give as a little warning, there is not an official ending scene in Wives and Daughters because sadly Elizabeth Gaskell passed away before being able to finish writing the novel. It lacked about 10 to 15 pages, just the last chapter, whereas the miniseries gives a beautiful couple of ending scenes to it. So I always like to follow up a reread of Wives and Daughters with watching the miniseries. Next is David Copperfield. This is one that I actually have not read yet. I just adore the miniseries with Daniel Radcliffe. This one also includes Maggie Smith and so many other good names in there. Imelda Staunton, a lot of Harry Potter actors for those of you Harry Potter fans out there. But it just has such a spirit of fun about it. Even though there are some very serious things that happen, I really do appreciate that in a story that has some really heartbreaking, really sad plot lines, that there is a lot of comedic relief. And I think you need that in a story where there is a lot of darkness. You need some light in there. And it's just a really wonderful miniseries. The next one that's a nice short little nugget of the Victorian novel is Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy. This is really, from the Hardy that I've read, it feels very different from his others. It's very short. It's not the most like knock your socks off Victorian novel, but it still has Hardy's writing, and so I do recommend it. And I recommend it especially for this challenge because it's one of my favorite miniseries out there. A really nice, short and sweet one starring Keeley Hawes, and I really think it's just, if you love miniseries, you'll enjoy this one if you haven't seen it. And I'm pretty sure this is on YouTube. The last time I watched it, it was on YouTube at least. And next is Far from the Madding Crowd. Now, the only adaptation I have seen is the most recent one with Carey Mulligan, but I thought it was excellent. This is a Victorian novel that I read last year. It was the third Thomas Hardy I'd read and remains my favorite of his, and just spurred me on to continue reading more Thomas Hardy. It's just amazing. It's basically the story of Bathsheba Everdeen, and she inherits a sheep farm and kind of all of her romantic entanglements, dare I say. I don't know if it's quite the right phrase, but anyhow, the men who are pursuing her and all of the drama that unfolds from that. But also the most amazing part of the book to me is how the land is its own character. And in the movie, I think that is really portrayed well. So I think it's an excellent adaptation. Next is The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I talked about this last year as one of my favorite Victorian novels. It's a really great classic mystery of a stolen jewel, the Moonstone. And I watched last October the 2016 edition of this. And for those of you Amazon Prime users, it is on Amazon Prime. I think it might also be on BritBox, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyhow, this was a fabulous adaptation, and it made it feel as exciting as the book did to me. So I really do recommend it. And The Moonstone also, as far as Victorian novels goes, it is semi-shorter. I think it's around 400 pages. So like I said, for a Victorian novel, that's actually fairly brief. And then the next one that I will be doing this year is The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. This is a miniseries starring Ciarán Hinds, who I love and adore in the 1995 Persuasion. I have not yet watched this miniseries, so I can't recommend it 100% wholeheartedly, but I have good faith that one that Ciarán Hinds is in will be good. So I do recommend that to you all. So that is the first challenge, the general challenge. The next challenge, mine, is to read a Victorian novel with a proper noun in the title. I just thought it would be fun to find the ones that have the name of a place as the title or the name of a person, because there are many Victorian novels that way. And it will also get me to recommend some that I maybe don't normally talk about as much because they maybe aren't like the top tier favorites for me, but I still do really like them. And the first is Dombey and Son by Charles Dickens. This remains one of my favorite Dickens, and it's such an underrated one that people aren't talking about. It is about Mr. Dombey and how he has this family business, Dombey and Son, and he wants his son to take over. And then kind of, because he's so focused on his son, how that affects his relationship with his daughter. And it's a fabulous Dickens. So I really do recommend that. Then Lorna Doone, which if you're looking for something that feels fairly fairy tale-ish, I think this is a great one. I love the woodland setting, and you get to see kind of nature change throughout the year. And he's just a really dynamic narrator. So I think it's a really great pick. Next is Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. This is definitely a more challenging one. So if you feel up for the challenge, you feel like you want to challenge yourself, I really do recommend this one. I think the reading of this one comes easier out of this one or Middlemarch. And it's a really interesting, compelling storyline that moves rather quickly. And there's two main storylines. Daniel Deronda, who is trying to figure out his heritage, his lineage, and exactly what he wants to do with his life. So it's a really critical time in his life. And then in addition to that is Gwendolyn Harleth, who is also figuring out, how she will find happiness, how she will pursue it, what exactly she's willing to do to gain that. Next is Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell. This I read 2 years ago during the first Victober, and this is very different from Elizabeth Gaskell's novels, but then again, all of her novels feel very unique amongst themselves. And this one takes place in a shore town, which is called Monkshaven in the book, but Elizabeth Gaskell was inspired after visiting the village of Whitby, and especially the press gang that happened in the 1700s. So she incorporates all of this into her story, but I would say this by far feels the most gothic out of all her novels. So if you love the extremely romantic atmosphere, I do really recommend this one. And I loved and adored it. You do have to be willing to kind of get by and push through the dialogue, which can be rather confusing. But I did hear from Gemma at Nonfic Books that if you she is sort of from that area or from close to that area, and so the slang and the dialect makes a lot more sense to her. So I think if you're just willing to look up a lot of words and take your time with it, it is a story that is really rewarding and has really stayed with me. 2 years later, I can just still remember it so very vividly. Next is Lady Audley's Secret. This is a glorious Victorian sensation novel that is mostly a mystery and was the most beautiful, fast-paced thing I've ever read. It's just an amazing book where there is Lady Audley, and she is recently married, so now she's become Lady Audley, and one of her husband's close friends meets her and wants to know, like, what is the deal with her? Where has she come from? That she seems to be not quite up front with who she is. So it's just a glorious, glorious book. And if you want something really fast-paced, but still with the lyrical writing, I think this is a great one to read. There were very, very few passages that felt like they lagged to me. Then moving on to Dr. Thorne by Anthony Trollope. This is a very fun and lighthearted and witty Victorian novel that I read last year. And I think it's extremely rewarding. Just like I said, highly amusing. And then I also want to recommend the next in the Barsetshire series, and that is Framley Parsonage. This I actually liked even slightly more than Dr. Thorne, as much as I loved it. I think I just found myself I find myself as I go through this series becoming more emotionally involved as the series goes on. So I think that's part of it. But also maybe I was a little bit more in touch with these characters. And again, just highly witty, very amusing, but also some really thought-provoking things in there. And Dr. Thorne deals with Dr. Thorne deals with one of the main characters, Frank, falling in love with a woman who does not have title or money, and kind of all the drama that ensues because his family really does not want him to marry her. And then I don't want to give spoilers for Framley Parsonage in case people consider it a spoiler, but I will say it's sort of similar themes, but it's about people making decisions based on what others will think of them and not maybe what they kind of feel within themselves. Then next on the list is Cranford. I'm recommending it again. Like I said, this is just a lovely little nugget of a Victorian novel, a series of little vignettes, but still having Gaskell's clever and beautiful and vivid writing in it. Then Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. I have many Elizabeth Gaskell on here because she is my favorite Victorian author. And so I do really recommend Ruth. It's one I haven't talked about as much, but I still really did enjoy it. And I've heard people say that it's like the Scarlet Letter, but you know, in the Victorian era. Ruth is the main character in this, and it's kind of her making her way in the world and having to deal with consequences from certain things that happen to her, certain actions that happen. And I just think it has a really cozy feel to it and some really amusing passages, but also some really heartwarming passages and also some passages that really want to anger you. So I really did enjoy Ruth, and I will reread it one day. Even if I haven't spoken about it as much, it's just because I get caught up talking about other Victorian novels. And next on the list is Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. I think amongst the Dickens fans on BookTube, I haven't heard as many people talk about Oliver Twist. I think there might not be as dynamic of characters in this, but it was my very first Dickens to read, so it has a very, very special place in my heart. And I think that if you love Dickens, I think you'll still be able to find some things that you like in this. It is the story of Oliver, an orphan, and I just think there are some really memorable characters in this. Fagin and the Artful Dodger and Bill Sikes, I think, are just really memorable people. I think the plot is very fast-paced. It just keeps going and going, and it passed by very quickly for me, and I really think of it fondly. And then next is a couple Bronte novels. The first is Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. I think if you want, again, a shorter Bronte novel, this is a really great one to go. It's just very, very sweet. It's like a tamed down Jane Eyre. But then also, I can't not recommend Jane Eyre. So if you just really want something that for the month of October just feels so gothic and atmospheric, it is a wonderful book to turn to and has amazing depictions and descriptions of nature. And I just love Jane Eyre so much. So those are all my recommendations. I want to keep this video going. And so I'll move on to the next challenge, which is Lucy's challenge to read a novel written by a woman anonymously or under a pseudonym. So you have several options there, and go see Lucy's video if you want recommendations for that challenge. And I know she's going to have some great ones and maybe some new ones that we haven't heard of. Next is Ange's challenge to read a book written by one of the host's favorite authors. And so you can go hear Ange talk about that challenge in her video, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing what she has to say about it. And hopefully you have somebody in there amongst our favorite authors that you would like to read. And lastly is Katie's challenge to read a Victorian novel from the first or the last decade from the Victorian era, which I think is such a fun challenge. So go see Katie's video if you want more information about that challenge and if you want to kind of know some good suggestions for the challenge. Then lastly, an exciting new addition that we are having this year for Victober is a group read. So Katie created a poll on Goodreads and asked about whether you all would rather read a Anthony Trollope, Wilkie Collins, Elizabeth Gaskell, or a Thomas Hardy. And Elizabeth Gaskell won by a mile on Twitter and Goodreads. So the group read that we have selected is Wives and Daughters. So I'm sure there will be more information out there later, but I cannot tell you how happy it makes me because this is my most beloved Victorian novel. I don't think it will ever be topped. I adore this book so much. So I will link my review down below in case you weren't motivated enough to read it. Yes, so I do really hope you'll join me. And if you're thinking that it sounds intimidating because it is a longer book, it's almost 900 pages, I'll just say it always goes by so fast, so fast. So through your local library, through apps, I think you really would be able to read it in a month if it was a goal of yours. Or you could just start it and then really take your time finishing it. I will have a video coming out during Victober about ways to help you read Victorian novels during the month, different resources you have. So that will be coming out and hopefully might be a help to you to figure out exactly how to get in these chunkers over the course of the month. I am so excited to do Victober with all of you lovely people, and you'll be seeing many more videos from me. Please comment down below, dialogue with me, tell me all of the exciting stuff that you are planning for Victober, and I will see you guys for another video soon. Bye.